Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is absolutely one of the most phenomenal stories of corporate survival and reinvention out there. I mean, if you grew up in the 80s or 90s, Nintendo was literally synonymous with video games, right? They completely dominated our living rooms. But as we rolled into the 2000s, well, that dominance was suddenly under massive threat. The whole industry shifted right beneath their feet, and they were caught in this high-stakes battle just to survive. But this isn't your typical story about a company just scraping by in a crowded market. Oh no. This is the story of a company that looked at the rulebook, threw it out the window, backed away from the fight everyone else was having, and completely changed how we actually play. We're going to explore exactly how this gaming giant went from crushing market pressure to absolute undeniable triumph.
Nintendo has never been the biggest technology company in the gaming industry. Now, just let that sink in for a second. When I first heard that, it felt kind of backwards, didn't it? We're so conditioned to assume the video game industry is all about the tech. You know, who has the fastest processors, who can push the most polygons, who's got the biggest hard drives. But think about what this reality actually meant for Nintendo. For decades, they really haven't built the most powerful consoles. While their rivals were basically trying to build supercomputers for your living room, chasing hyper-realistic graphics and going toe-to-toe spec for spec, Nintendo chose a completely different path. It's wild to think about, but they realized super early on that trying to be the most powerful, that was actually a trap.
Okay, let's dive into this. Back then, the traditional industry playbook was all about this massive, relentless power race. Everyone was completely obsessed with processing speed, massive computing power, and making the most visually demanding games possible. It was this unwinnable tech arms race. But Nintendo, they took a radically different approach. Instead of playing David to the industry Goliaths, they pivoted towards social, physical, and accessible play. They decided, hey, instead of fighting an unwinnable war of raw computational power, we're just going to be the most different. They wanted to create experiences that invited absolutely everyone in, rather than walling gaming off for just the hardcore tech enthusiasts.
Part 1. The Threat. The Hardware Power Race.
So, to really grasp the stakes here, you gotta picture the early 2000s. The console market was basically a bloodbath. Sony and Microsoft had entered the fray, and their pockets were unimaginably deep. They were fighting viciously, literally taking massive losses on their hardware just to conquer your living room. And Nintendo, even with their intensely loyal fans, was under severe existential market pressure. The GameCube just hadn't performed the way they needed it to against the PlayStation 2, and honestly, the future looked pretty bleak. If Nintendo just tried to copy their rivals, they risked getting entirely crushed by sheer financial force. What happened next was a wild roller coaster ride across 2 decades, orchestrating a massive, world-changing breakthrough in 2006, facing a devastating stumble that nearly broke them in 2012, and then engineering a legendary, defining recovery in 2017.
Part 2. The Pivot to Play. Changing the Rules. The ultimate paradigm shift happened in 2006. Nintendo launched the Wii. And let's be totally honest here, at the time, the industry's reaction was just sheer confusion. Hardcore gamers looked at it and laughed. The graphics definitely weren't cutting edge. The hardware wasn't breaking any processing records. And the controller? I mean, it literally looked like a simple TV remote. But that perceived weakness, that was their Trojan horse. It was a brilliantly calculated design choice that completely disarmed the intimidation factor of traditional gaming controllers, which by that point had sprouted over a dozen buttons and dual analog sticks. Because of that simple, welcoming remote, Nintendo suddenly reached an entirely different demographic. They weren't just targeting the hardcore gaming base anymore. No, they were bringing in families, parents, grandparents, and people who had never ever considered themselves gamers. Just picture it, the absolute surprise of seeing a 70-year-old grandmother joyfully beating her teenage grandson at virtual bowling on a Sunday afternoon. That was a total revolution. They took gaming from this solitary act of staring statically at a screen and turned it into a physical, highly social activity. They didn't just capture existing demand in a crowded market, they manifested entirely new demand out of thin air.
And this philosophy wasn't just for the living room. It extended seamlessly right into their handheld devices too. With the Nintendo DS, their entire focus was on making technology more human. While their competitors were busy trying to shrink high-end console graphics down to fit a portable screen, Nintendo introduced dual screens, a stylus for natural touching and drawing, and a microphone so you could literally speak to your games. They built entire hardware systems around natural, intuitive human behavior. It proved something so fundamental. True innovation isn't always about making things more complex. Often, the absolute most disruptive thing you can do is make your technology more human and profoundly accessible.
Part 3. The Stumble. Creativity Without Clarity. Of course, the path to sustained success is rarely a straight line, right? After the incredible record-shattering high of the Wii, Nintendo introduced the Wii U. Now, on paper, the core concept actually had a lot of potential. It was a home console paired with a bulky tablet-like controller that offered this asymmetric second-screen gameplay. It was creative, it was definitely different, but when you're following up a massive hit that literally changed the world, expectations are sky high. And when the Wii U hit the shelves, well, the reality of its execution resulted in a pretty devastating failure because it was missing one essential ingredient. Imagine being a parent walking into an electronics store back in 2012, looking to buy a holiday gift. You see the Wii U box, and you wonder, wait, is this an expensive new tablet accessory for the old Wii we already have sitting at home? Or is this an entirely new console? The market was utterly bewildered. Customers just didn't understand what it was, why they needed it, or what made it an essential upgrade. The Wii U struggled immensely commercially, and it plunged Nintendo right back into the severe pressure cooker they thought they'd finally escaped. It serves as this incredibly stark reminder for all of us. Innovation without crystal clear communication and obvious value will almost always fail, no matter how clever the actual technology is.
Part 4. The synthesis. The hybrid plays solution. So, Nintendo desperately needed another reinvention, and in 2017 they launched the Switch. And this brilliantly illustrates how they synthesized everything they learned from both their greatest triumphs and their worst mistakes. The proposition was beautifully simple, and the marketing communicated it instantly. Step 1. Play an epic adventure at home on your big TV. Step 2. Simply slide the Joy-Con controllers onto the side of the screen, hear that satisfying physical snap, and pick it up. Step 3. Keep playing that exact same game on your morning commute or on a flight or sitting in the park. They seamlessly solved that historic divide between the power of a home console and the convenience of a handheld device.
The brilliance of the Switch wasn't found in teraflops or processor speeds or raw computing power. Its true value was ultimate flexibility. It was the sheer magic of portability, the ability to just instantly snap off a controller and hand it to a friend for spontaneous local multiplayer, whether you're chilling on a couch or at a cafe. Nintendo had completely abandoned the hardware tech race yet again. Instead, they doubled down on engineering the absolute most convenient, frictionless play experience possible, leaning heavily into that family appeal and creating this amazing platform for independent games.
Part 5. The secret weapon. The power of Nintendo IP.
Now, to truly understand Nintendo's survival, we have to look way beyond the plastic and silicone. Just think about these names for a second. Mario, Zelda, Pokemon. It really gives you a sense of awe when you realize these aren't just software titles. They are entirely realized worlds. They are foundational, cherished childhood memories for millions upon millions of people, and they stand as some of the most powerful cultural assets on the planet. This is Nintendo's true uncopyable moat. A competitor could hypothetically build a faster console tomorrow, sure, but they can never, ever build a console that plays the next mainline Mario or Zelda game. The hardware itself is incredibly valuable strictly because it serves as the exclusive gateway into these beloved universes.
And Nintendo isn't just stopping at the console anymore. They've meticulously built out an entire emotional ecosystem. They're taking those massive cultural assets and integrating them into hardware, software, and mobile games, yes, but they're also expanding into major Hollywood visual content and actual physical theme parks. They're actively expanding the sheer number of people who get to interact with their characters. By building these robust emotional ecosystems, they're ensuring their brand touches lives, sparks joy, and builds huge loyalty across multiple entirely different physical and digital avenues.
Part 6. The moral of the story: innovation is about play.
People do not only buy technology, they buy play. This profoundly simple statement really captures the very essence of their historic turnaround. When the rest of the industry was zigging toward a hyper-complex, intimidating technology with steep learning curves and dark, gritty realism, Nintendo completely zagged toward pure, unadulterated joy. Just think about the stark contrast between navigating a massively complicated user interface and the simple, euphoric thrill of crossing the finish line in Mario Kart with your friends. Nintendo realized something so essential about human nature. The ultimate consumer product isn't the one with the best specifications, it's the one that makes us feel something deep and memorable. So I'm going to leave you with this final challenge to reflect on. How can you apply this massive differentiation strategy to your own industry? Whether you're building software, running retail, managing services, or working in manufacturing, ask yourself, are you just fighting a relentless, highly expensive, and exhausting battle over minor technical specs? Or are you willing to step back, rethink the rules of the game entirely, and focus on the actual, emotional, human experience of your customer?
Stop fighting over who has the most impressive specs and start asking who is delivering the absolute best experience. Thanks for exploring this explainer with me. Now go change the game.